Historically, drugs have been pushed onto nations that couldn't be beat militarily, such as China, in order to chip away at the moral and societal fabric that holds everything together. Today in America, we have drug epidemics of all different kinds, from heroin to cocaine to drugs even worse like meth and all kinds of pharmaceuticals. These drugs rot our society from within and make us weaker and more susceptible to an outside force directing our lives. Coleman also talks about the use of drugs to make the people complacent with their miserable situation on pages 137 to 138. Quote, "Now let us consider another type of drug still undiscovered, but probably just around the corner, a drug making people happy in situations where they would normally feel miserable. Is there anyone more miserable than a person who has sought and been unable to find work? Such a drug would be a blessing, but a blessing fraught with grave social and political dangers. By making a harmless chemical euphoria freely available, a dictator can reconcile entire population to a state of affairs to which self-respecting human beings ought not to be reconciled." Unquote. This is a work that Coleman cites in his book, Committee of 300. It's called The Imperial Drug Trade by Joshua Rowntree. It was published in 1906, the second edition. You can find this book on archive.org, and I'll link to it in the description. But it goes through the history of the drug trade, the British drug trade, and the East India Company, and all these other things, because drugs have been historically a very important part of the way that these people control everything. We see how they do everything with pharmaceuticals nowadays. So I just thought this would be interesting to include. It's called The Imperial Drug Trade. Check it out.
In my book, The Committee of 300, which took 20 years of research, and incidentally, I was only a little bit behind with Karl Marx. He spent 30 years in the British Museum in London, where he got most of his things from. I point out that the British East India Company was the most powerful trading company in the world. They made their massive monies out of the dope trade. They first grew prime poppies in Kew Gardens in Kensington, London, got the best producing opium poppies. They then shipped them to Benares in India, where they began a massive plantation of poppies, opium producing poppies. They then used their famous tea clippers to transport the poppies in the form of raw opium to China. And by their military force, they imposed an opium policy on China that turned the Chinese nation into a nation of addicts.
They even want to have this chemical high readily available for people who they foresee to be unemployed with no purpose in their life. On page 138, Coleman says, quote, "In one of the Royal Institute of International Affairs top secret papers, the scenario is laid out as followed in part. Having been failed by Christianity and with unemployment on every hand, those who have been without jobs for 5 years or more will turn away from the church and seek solace in drugs. That is when full control of the drug trade must be completed in order that the government of all countries who are under our jurisdiction will have a monopoly which we will control through supply. Drug bars will take care of the unruly and the discontent. Would-be revolutionaries will be turned into harmless addicts with no will of their own," unquote. On page 155, he continues, quote, "Pornography shall be promoted and be compulsory, showing in every theater of cinema, including homosexual and lesbian pornography. The use of recreational drugs shall be compulsory, with each person allotted drug quotas, which can be purchased at a one-world government stores throughout the world. Mind-control drugs will be expanded and usage become compulsory. Such mind-controlled drugs shall be given in food and or water supplies without the knowledge and or consent of the people. Drug bars shall be set up, run by one-world government employees, where the slave class shall be able to spend their free time. In this manner, the non-elite masses will be reduced to the level and behavior of controlled animals with no will of their own and easily regimented and controlled," unquote. So this is all stuff we heard from Bertrand Russell in his The Impact of Science on Society. All these globalists parrot the same exact message. Very few of the ideas are usually their own. Television and computer screens everywhere at all times has been one of the most influential phenomena affecting the first world, and especially America today. If you have the misfortune to have to go into a sports bar, you will see and smell all of the distraction and poison that people live for today. Sometimes up to 3 or 4 screens everywhere you look. And all of this keeps people confused, entertained, numb, and hypnotized. Zbigniew Zabrzyński, in his book Between Two Ages, talks about how the new tectonic era will bring people into a hive mind consciousness. This, of course, will make people much easier to control. Control the mind, control the body. On page 28, talking of Brzezinski, Coleman says this, quote, Brzezinski went on to say that our society is not in an information revolution based on amusement-focused spectator spectacles, saturation coverage by television of sporting events, which provide an opiate for an increasingly purposeless mass. Unquote. Was Brzezinski another seer and a prophet? Could he see into the future? The answer is no. What he wrote in his book was simply copied from the Committee of 300's blueprint given to the Club of Rome for execution. Isn't it true that by 1991 we already have a purposeless mass of citizens? Who could say that 30 million unemployed and 4 million homeless people are a purposeless mass, or at least the nucleus of one? Unquote. These men who work out these ideas do so for the ruling class, so as to create better and more efficient ways by which to pacify, control, and lead the masses. The Tavistock Institute is one of the most influential forces swaying public opinion and setting up every possible dialectic in order to keep we the people confused, divided, and conquered. It's important for us to remember that the entertainment that we consume on a regular basis is of this very nature. It's not the most popular TV show, news agency, newspaper, a movie, only because of its entertainment value. It also has a large social programming and propaganda agenda within it as well. Control the mind, control the body. Coleman says on page 158, quote, all information services and print media shall be under the control of the one world government. Regular brainwashing control measures shall be passed off as entertainment in the manner in which it was practiced and became fine art in the United States. Youths removed from disloyal parents shall receive special education designed to brutalize them. Youths of both sexes shall receive training to qualify as prison guards for the one world labor camp system, unquote. This reminds me of a famous David Rockefeller quote that was leaked from a 1991 Bilderberg meeting. Quote, we are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to national autodetermination practiced. Unquote. The Royal Institute for International Affairs, or the RIIA, also known as Chatham House, was created in 1919 by the bankster thieves and elite as a think tank for the New World Order. From Wikipedia, quote, in the University of Pennsylvania's rankings announced in January 2017 for their global Go-To Think Tank report, Chatham House was ranked the think tank of the year and the second most influential in the world after the Brookings Institute, unquote, a think tank of the exact same nature. These think tanks are very important to the elite for the purpose of shaping public opinion on both sides of the political spectrum. Institutes and think tanks on both sides serve the purposes of the NWO in one way, shape, or form. Carol Quigley tells us a bit about the RIIA and its sister corporations on page 132 of his Tragedy and Hope. Quote, in 1909 to 1913, they organized semi-secret groups known as roundtable groups. In 1919, they founded the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Chatham House. Similar institutions for international affairs were established in the chief British dominions and in the United States, where it is known as the Council on Foreign Relations, unquote.
There are many other societies that are operating for the RIIA. The Illuminati, which has been around for many, many years. I've written a work called The Illuminati in America, 1784 to 1994. A lot of people think this is an ancient secret society that's gone away. They think that Adam Weishaupt had a quarrel with the Catholic Church and that's it. Don't you believe it? 13 of the top families in the United States are in the Illuminati today, and they have a big say on everything that happens politically in this country. Then we have the Society of Cincinnati, which I don't think many of you will have heard about. That is an ultra secret society to which every president of the United States is forced to belong, including our so-called conservative presidents. And I point this out to you to show you that it doesn't matter who is in the White House. This committee of 300, through the Royal Institute for International Affairs, through the Council on Foreign Relations, exercises complete control.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City. But it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
We have further challenging issues to address between now and 2015, including how to take account of countries' common but differentiated responsibilities for tackling climate change, by moving towards a spectrum of commitments that reflects the economic realities of the 21st century. The current binary divide between developing and developed countries was defined in 1990, and I believe it's time to move on from it.
But the fact is, all of our legislation is drafted by people who have been through the Tavistock Institute process. And one of the important groups which handles all this is called the Institute for Policy Studies. Now we have a chart. This book was written by James Tyson, Target America, the Influence of Communist Propaganda on U.S. Media, published in 1981. He has here the table of organization of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union and its agents in the United States, and it lists, of course, the National Lawyers Guild, Communist Party USA, and the Institute for Policy Studies.
Another important think tank talked about in the book on page 199 is the Institute for Policy Studies. Quote, "The entire spectrum of the New Left in the United States was the work of British intelligence MI6, acting through Roundtable Assets and the Institute for Policy Studies, just as it did with all countries with a Republican base, whose policies had to be changed. LPS played a leading role, even as it does today, in South Africa and South Korea." I'm sorry, that was IPS. Much of IPS's activities are explained in my work, IPS Revisited, published in 1990. IPS had one main function, that being to sow discord and spread disinformation, resulting in chaos. One such program aimed at America's youth, centered on drugs. Through a series of IPS fronts, acts like the stoning of Nixon's motorcade and large numbers of bombings, a climate of deception was effectively created, which led a majority of Americans to believe that the United States was under threat from the KGB, the GRU, and the Cuban DGI. The word went out that a lot of these imaginary agents had close ties to the Democrats through George McGovern. It was in fact a model disinformation campaign for which MI6 is justly famous." Unquote. Concerning the famous Roundtable Group and British politics, Carroll Quigley in his Tragedy and Hope on page 471 states, quote, "Until 1915, the two parties represented the same social class, the small group known as society. In fact, both parties, conservative and liberals, were controlled from at least 1866 by the same small clique of society. This clique consisted of no more than half a dozen chief families, their relatives and allies, reinforced by an occasional recruit from outside. These recruits were generally obtained from the select educational system of society. Going to page 472, quote, "At the beginning of the 20th century, the inner clique of the Conservative Party was made up almost completely of the Cecil family and their relatives," unquote. And on page 581, the Round Table group later became the Cliveden set. It dominated the Royal Institute of International Affairs, called Chatham House, unquote. On page 145, Coleman says, quote, "The Round Table was established in South Africa by Cecil Rhodes and funded by the English Rothschild family. Its purpose was to train business leaders loyal to the British Crown who would secure the vast gold and diamond treasures for the British Crown. South Africans had their birthrights stolen from them in a coup so massive and all-pervading that it was apparent only a central unified command could have pulled it off. That unified command was the Committee of 300, unquote." Coleman states on page 146 of the Committee of 300, quote, "It was Green, the son of a Christian evangelical cleric, who spawned Rhodes, Milner, John Wheeler Bennett, A.D. Lindsay, George Bernard Shaw, and Hjalmar Schacht, Hitler's finance minister." I'm sure I said that wrong. I pause here to remind readers that the Round Table is only one sector of this vast and all-encompassing Committee of 300. Yet the Round Table itself consists of a maze of companies, institutions, banks, and educational establishments, which in itself would take qualified insurance actuaries a year to sort out, unquote. Another group that Coleman refers to in the book are the Bilderbergers. This group has been the center of much controversy over the last decade or so, with authors, reporters, and researchers following them all across the world to attempt to sneak into their highly secretive and highly guarded meetings. On page 147 he says, quote, "Some of the spin-offs of the Round Table are the Bilderbergers, set up and run by Duncan Sandys, a prominent politician and son-in-law of the late Winston Churchill. The Ditchley Foundation, a secret bankers club which I exposed in my 1983 work, International Bankers Conspiracy, the Ditchley Foundation. The Trilateral Commission, the Atlantic Council, or the United States, and the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, whose well-hidden behind-the-scenes founder was Lord Bullock of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, for whom Robert Anderson fronted," unquote.
The Club of Rome is one of the most insidious, baneful organizations in existence today, which has done intolerable, immeasurable harm to the United States of America. This Committee of 300 told a man called Aurelio Pecci to form this Club of Rome with the main object of bringing down the industries and the agricultural development of the United States. He immediately wrote a paper in which he said there are too many people on the earth, and that the United States, with its industrial development, its agricultural development, is responsible for this curse of overpopulation. And he picked up the documentation for his work from Lord Bertrand Russell, a senior statesman of the Committee of 300. And Lord Bertrand Russell had written a work called The Impact of Science on Society. And if you can ever secure a copy of that book, which I doubt you'll be able to get, you will see in there that he said the world is grossly overpopulated and we have to get rid of at least half of the world's population, and it doesn't matter how we do it. So the Club of Rome was instituted and organized to start an attack on the world's population using the United States as the whipping boy. And they came up with a paper called the Zero Growth Post-Industrial Plan for Industry and Agriculture for the United States of America. 3 days after that plan was accepted as official United States policy by James Earl Carter, I was able to, through my intelligence people, get a copy of this insidious document. Basically what it said was that the middle class in the United States of America had to be destroyed, because in the coming push to a world order, the middle class would be the stumbling block, because history had shown that the peasant class in ancient days, when they had revolted, were just easily crushed. There was no resistance, but now had grown a new super class of people in the United States called the middle class.
One of the most important groups, according to Coleman, is called the Club of Rome, an organization put together by various elites in order to curb industrialization. The website says, quote, "The Club of Rome is an organization of individuals who share a common concern for the future of humanity and strive to make a difference. Our members are notable scientists, economists, businessmen and businesswomen, high-level civil servants, and former heads of state from all around the world. Our mission is to promote understanding of the global challenges facing humanity and to propose solutions through scientific analysis, communication, and advocacy," unquote. Sounds nice, right? Well, Dr. Coleman doesn't think so. He sees the Club of Rome for what they are, a communist organization bent on destroying the prosperity of the First World.
Called Stuart Chase, an arch-Fabian socialist, wrote a book called A New Deal. Frances Perkins, who was the first female socialist cabinet minister appointed in the United States in the Roosevelt administration, she got hold of a copy of this book and she ran to Roosevelt and said, "Look, this would be a marvelous program for you." So in the 1932 and by the way, don't call them the Democratic Party, because they are not. We are a confederated republic. We are a constitutional republic. In a confederated constitutional republic, you cannot have a Democratic Party. You can have a Democrat Party, and that's what we should start calling them. But she ran up, and Roosevelt was so enamored with this deal that in 1932 they hastily changed their platform, and he came out and announced his New Deal, which is a verbatim, word-for-word program taken from Stuart Chase's book, Socialism, A New Deal. Socialism is a failure, and we have creeping socialism in this country today, which has nowhere to go but to communism. In the New World Order, one world government. That is the direction that William Jefferson Clinton is pushing this country as hard as he can go, and GATT is an integral part of that. The socialist policies of England failed miserably. They got the great Professor Harold Lasky of the London School of Economics.
From Wikipedia, quote, "The Club of Rome was founded in April 1986 by Aurelio Pesci, an Italian industrialist, and Alexander King, a Scottish scientist. It was formed when a small international group of people from the fields of academia, civil society, diplomacy, and industry met at Villa Farnese in Rome, hence the name. The Club of Rome stimulated considerable public attention with the first report to the club, The Limits to Growth. Published in 1972, its computer simulation suggested that economic growth could not continue indefinitely because of resource depletion. The 1973 oil crisis increased public concern about this problem. The report went on to sell 30 million copies in more than 20 languages, making it the best-selling environmental book in history, unquote. In 1991, the club published The First Global Revolution, asking the world to look in the mirror if they want to know what's wrong with the world, especially the environment. The report says, quote, "New enemies have to be identified, new strategies imagined, and new weapons devised. In searching for a common enemy against whom we can unite, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. In their totality and their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which must be confronted by everyone together. But in designating these dangers as the enemy, we fall into the trap, which we have already warned readers about, namely mistaking symptoms for causes. All these dangers are caused by human intervention in natural processes. and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy is humanity itself." Unquote.
A highly sophisticated international criminal organization. 'Ndrangheta is one of the most dangerous criminal groups in the world.
See, I didn't even realize that the mafia was still so powerful, or even still around for that matter.
Things had changed drastically between then and 2019. It's a reminder that the old school organized crime families haven't vanished. They've just been forced to venture further into the murky underground.
It was born here in Calabria, in the lands of southern Italy, but today lives in 32 countries around the world. The 'Ndrangheta is not an Italian folkloric phenomenon. It's a global threat.
The southern faction, or what they call the Fourth Mafia, is called the Sacred United Crown, or Sacra Unita Corona. In March 2016, it was revealed that the mafia had been working aggressively to establish itself in medical and pharmaceutical industries across Lombardy, which became Italy's COVID-19 ground zero, even dispatching cartel operatives and their relatives to qualify in medicine, nursing, and pharmacology. So in 2016, we see that this faction of the mafia in Italy was working hard to get its operatives and relatives involved in pharmacology and pharmaceuticals. Now you can find dozens of these headlines. Mafias are allegedly exploiting the chaos caused by the COVID-19 emergency to infiltrate even deeper into sectors they were already present. The Italian mafia made capital investments in the pharmaceutical and healthcare sectors at the same time that this man and these guys are coming into power.
All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. Beat me, hate me, you can never break me. Will me, thrill me, you can never kill me. Shoot me, sue me, everybody do me. Kick me, punch me, don't you black or white me. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us.
Now this brings us back to Giuliani,
What's your mission?
to disrupt the world. Trump's lawyer in the good fight.
As Trump's personal lawyer, he tirelessly defended him.
Donald Trump is the agent of change, and he will be the leader of the change we need.
And mayor of New York City during 9/11.
Firefighters accused him of rushing 9/11 recovery efforts and downplaying dangerous health conditions at Ground Zero.
And who was Trump's pick for ambassador to the country of Italy? Louis Eisenberg, the man in charge of the New York Port Authority on September 11th, 2001. Louis is an Italian-American born into a Jewish family who was a fundraising leader for the 2016 Trump presidential campaign. During his time at the New York Port Authority, his most notable achievement was the negotiation of a long-term lease with Larry Silverstein for the World Trade Center. I couldn't figure it out. How does this man's experience at the New York Port Authority qualify him to become ambassador to Italy? Now this took me some time until I realized the answer is right in front of us. Who controls the ports? Who organized the union workers and controls the ports of New York? Who controls the union dock workers in Italy?
Construction, the lifeblood of New York. It also gives transfusions of money and power to organized crime.
In the construction industry in general, the mob controlled a lot of the construction trades in New York. If you're a developer, it's hard to avoid them, and they control the cement companies, the concrete companies.
Mafia-connected companies received contracts from the Port Authority to clean up debris after 9/11. Anthony Fontanetta and Mark Jukovic were executives at the Port Authority and were both found guilty of racketeering and bribery involving millions in stolen cash from federal aid for Ground Zero cleanup. The Port Authority has a long history with organized crime. However, on 9/11, the Port Authority's records were destroyed because they were allegedly located in Building 7. Now, the owners of the construction company Peter Scalamandre and Sons were convicted of paying off members of the Lucchese crime family for labor racketeering prior to 9/11. Peter Scalamandre and Sons was later shut down, working as subcontractors during the Ground Zero cleanup. You see, New York City business and politics has long been infiltrated by organized crime.
The federal government has charged more than 40 people in a massive crackdown on political corruption and money laundering schemes. Most of the people are New Jersey politicians and public officials, as well as leaders of the Jewish community in Deal and Brooklyn.
New Jersey's corruption problem is one of the worst, if not the worst, in the nation. Corruption is not only pervasive, it has become ingrained in New Jersey's political culture.
If you were a New Yorker, you understood that the mob was a very, very powerful force in the life of New York City. Essentially, it was almost as if the mafia was a separate government.
So, was Trump connected to the mafia?
He's a casino owner. I mean, you know, how many casino owners in the US haven't got links to to crime?
Have you ever knowingly done business with what I like to call organized crime? Have they ever stopped by?
I've really tried to stay away from them as much as
possible.
John Cody was a Teamsters leader whose workers delivered cement to the construction sites. And so he was later convicted of racketeering, and he had close relationships with Carlo Gambino and Paul Castellano, who were mafia leaders in New York. And Trump, dealt with him directly.
Growing up in New York and doing business in New York, I would say there might have been one of those characters along the way.
Tony Salerno, he was the head of the Genovese crime family, which was the most powerful crime family in the city.
And Fat Tony didn't just supply concrete to Donald Trump. The two men also shared a lawyer, Roy Cohn.
Ken Shapiro, and he also worked with the Philadelphia mob and the mob boss at the time, Nicky Scarfo, who they called Little Nicky, and he and the other gentleman I just mentioned, Dan Sullivan, the Teamster, who knew Trump, owned a piece of property together, and Trump needed it to build his first casino, so they leased it to him.
It's almost like, how could you possibly own a casino unless you had links to organized crime?
I have met on occasion a few of those people. They happen to be very nice people. You just don't want to owe them money.
Trump used the Gambino lawyer, Roy Cohn.
Donald Trump, he said, you stand up to the establishment, and I come see you.
The whole point was to resist. Never admit that you're wrong. Trump fell in love with that.
When John Gotti walked into a bar and shot a guy in the head, Roy managed to get Gotti off.
We have Cohn investigating homosexuals very aggressively.
That he was the one who threw the good parties.
And there were rumors he was picking up male prostitutes. I was in his office when Nancy Reagan called and thanked him for getting her husband elected.
Cohn looked at Donald Trump as a protege. Donald had the money, and Roy had the balls and the shrewdness.
The Gambinos and Genovese's S&A construction company were used for Trump's buildings in Manhattan.
Mr. Felix Sater.
My life has been beyond interesting.
Sater had an office in Trump Tower, a Trump email, and a business card listing him as a senior advisor to Trump.
Steve Mnuchin, Gary Cohn, Steve Bannon, Anthony Scaramucci, Dina Powell, all part of the Trump administration and all top executives for Goldman Sachs. Now, Trump was advised by Eric Prince and Joseph Smits, and they are both Vatican Roman Knights and former Blackwater executives. Now, Trump appointed Eric Prince's sister, Betsy DeVos, as the United States Secretary of Education.
Trump's first wife, Ivana, was born to a member of the Czechoslovakian secret intelligence. She has been invited to White House dinners for decades, which she attended while she was still married to Trump.
According to Wikipedia, Ivana Trump began dating Italian aristocrat Count Raffredo Gaetani del Aquilo de Argano Labatelli. Now, when you click on the link for this man's extremely long name, it takes you to this Wikipedia page. Gaetani, the name of an Italian noble family from the Papal States.
Black nobility family members, such as the Gaetanis, the Bourbon to Sicily family, and the Orsinis.
The New York Times published this article, and they referred to him as Mr. Gaetani. Quote, he grew up in a palace in Rome. He earned a doctorate in political science. Mr. Gaetani, being of such a powerful old Italian family, can count 2 popes amongst his ancestors.
She sure seems to be well connected. They all seem to be in the same club.
Is this why Giuliani was knighted by such a prestigious gangster?
The Savoy Orders have a strong and growing presence in the Americas. Headquartered in New York City, the American delegation of Savoy Orders and its charitable arm support the charitable, cultural, and dynastic traditions of the orders in North America, also directly supported through the International Association of Knights and Dames of the Savoy Orders in Switzerland. The American delegation of Savoy Orders is administered by a delegate who is appointed by the Grand Master, His Royal Highness Prince Victor Emmanuel of Savoy.
The Italian constitution required all male members of the House of Savoy to leave Italy and barred them from ever returning to Italian soil again. So these criminals cross the border and they settle on the lake. Ah, Switzerland. It's quite fitting that Vittorio would end up in Switzerland, considering it was his ancestors who founded the beautiful country.
Whose ancestral rule began in the area where today France, Italy, and Switzerland come together in the vicinity of Lake Geneva, and then gradually expanded over the Savoy dynasty's 1,000-year history into the modern Italian state. Today, the Knights and Dames of the Savoy Orders are represented by over 40 national and regional delegations throughout the world. Worldwide administration of the orders is directed by the Prince as Grand Master and by the Grand Chancellor from their headquarters offices at the Chancellery in Geneva, Switzerland.
Although the exact history of Switzerland is a bit shady, and there is some speculation that the Knights Templars settled here. However, Swiss nobility and the House of Savoy were certainly an influence in the founding of this country. Now this is when a light bulb went off. What do all of these corporations and organizations have in common? They are all located in Switzerland. A neutral, peacekeeping country known for its banking secrecy, full of exiled monarchs and notorious criminals. This 2006 article explains how Geneva is the capital of globalization. According to the government department responsible for promoting Switzerland's image abroad, Geneva is a vital element in the country's international marketing strategy. We want to develop an image of a modern, forward-looking country rather than relying on stereotypes such as mountains and chocolates. Geneva is a perfect example for us. And to convince people, you only need to remind them that the World Wide Web was first developed at the nuclear research facility CERN in Geneva in the 90s. Geneva started to take on a new role as a testing ground for globalization issues. Every year, the World Economic Forum organizes a meeting of global leaders, business figures, politicians, and intellectuals in Switzerland. Switzerland is also the seat of the guardian of the free market, the World Trade Organization, and its social counterpart, the International Labor Organization, as well as the World Intellectual Property Organization, which deals with trademarks for companies worldwide.
There is a single cohesive global public-private partnership that oversees the entire systems, and that's taken the form of global governance.
This is a laboratory for world governance. It is here that a new partnership is being forged between states, the private sector, and civil society.
The idea of compartmentalized hierarchical authority as a structure.
Geneva has become an international focal point for health issues. Switzerland needs to encourage these new collaborations between the private sector, NGOs, universities, and the state.
This can also be done politically. There is a political organization, a policy organization, I would say, called the Global Public-Private Partnership.
It should create a suitable working environment for the new bodies that emerge from these partnerships. And that's exactly what happened. Global governance.
A way of managing the whole of the world through a process called global governance.
Switzerland is also home to the Club of Rome. According to the Club of Rome website, Andre Hoffman is also on the board of trustees at the World Economic Forum and the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
The Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical and biological systems.
They've got a new idea, a new system, people have called that the New World Order or whatever, a new system that they want to sell to us. So how are they going to get us to believe in it?
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
The technological aspect of that is easy. You know, there are already AI algorithms on the earth that can manage just infinitely complex systems right down to the individual level.
Our bodies will be so high tech, we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
So it's not a problem to manage it, technologically speaking. Their problem is getting us to go along with it.
The technology exists, but how do we get it and implement it?
So here we have the shareholder of the COVID test, gathering ideas from the Club of Rome, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House think tank, and many other shady organizations, and meeting with other heads of his family-owned company to then share these ideas as agenda contributors to the World Economic Forum in Davos. All the while, our FDA commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, was getting paid by these same guys, and even being advised by the head of regulatory policy at Roche in Washington, D.C. Now, the ideas gathered at the club and shared at the forum eventually become law. They eventually become public policy.
It's now time to turn this agreement into policies and action, into laws and budget lines.
The Club of Rome wrote an open letter to global leaders, urging them to implement the Planetary Emergency Declaration and Plan, which supports lockdowns and other measures to combat global warming and climate change. A quote, green reboot after the pandemic.
All 193 UN member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
But that's part of Agenda 21, which is a plan for the entire century, Sustainable Development Goals. When we realise what sustainable development is really about, we are going to go absolutely mental. There will be a push for a global revolution. Because people will realise, hang on, they're taking everything.
Presidents, prime ministers, and other high-level representatives from around the world gathered at the UN headquarters in New York for a high-level debate on achieving the SDGs.
This is a business model on a global scale.
As previously mentioned, even back in 2006, Switzerland was leading the way in creating the global public-private partnerships of today.
Global public-private partnership, which is a global, for want of an expression, new world order.
Like there has been a lot of kind of almost global level power centralized in Switzerland for hundreds of years.
Switzerland.
Something kind of clicked with me is with Switzerland and being a neutral state and all these international, I was like, whoa.
And no one talks about it ever. No one talks about Switzerland ever.
International banking and high finance.
My name is Andrzej Kudelski. I'm chairman and CEO of the Kudelski Group.
Mr. Kudelski is also on the steering committee for the Bilderberg Group.
I cannot comment on Bilderberg conference.
The secrecy surrounding the Bilderberg Group gives rise to conspiracy theories. Are you plotting a new world order?
Certainly not.
No? One world government?
What an idea.
They're also famously neutral,
which dictates that the country is not to be involved in armed conflicts between other states. However, they are armed in order to ensure internal security and promote peace.
First we're going to come destroy everything, but now, hey, come on, let's keep peace, huh? Yeah. Let's keep it peaceful, guys.
Please welcome newly appointed United Nations Messenger of Peace, Mr. Leonardo DiCaprio.
It's easy to sit on your high horse and to be all about peace and prosperity and common sense for the greater good when you have already taken what you need, you know? Canaan took that. Then they were like, all right, now we got to stop making our hands dirty. We're no longer going to use a gun. We're going to start using loans and investments and you know, banks.
The Switzerland of supranational organizations, the UN, the World Trade Organization.
The WHO, Gavi, the World Economic Forum, Davos, CERN.
Definitely, you're onto something. I mean, where's the Bank of International Settlements?
That was one of my questions for you.
The Bank of International Settlements is the central bank of central banks. So commercial banks, high street banks, they bank with a central bank. So in America, this would be done by a Federal Reserve Bank. In the UK, we've got the Bank of England. So the Bank of International Settlements is the central bank of central banks. And that is based in Basel in Switzerland.
There's levels to this, and they know there's levels to this, and they're playing a different game. They're playing a different game. They're playing at a different level, and they figured out that perception is so important. So they all wear suits. They're living in this country with all these mountains and nature, so it already kind of resembles like decency.
What would the world be without our famous Swiss cheese?
They just figured out, like, you know what? All we have to do is put on our suits every day, wear our Rolexes, make sure that our hair is nice and slick, and just continue to commit our crimes on the highest level.
Now, this got me interested in learning more about how the government of Switzerland operates.
This is the temple of politicians. Nobody is safe from the temptations of power.
The National Council of Switzerland is the largest house of the Swiss legislature. It has 200 members, and aside from its regular sessions, in special situations such as political crises, wars, etc., they convene what they call extraordinary sessions. To date, there have been 8 extraordinary sessions, including the response to the Chernobyl incident, the financing of Swiss Air, which included the 1998 crash of Flight 111 and the stolen gold aboard. This crash was investigated by SAIC/Leidos, by the way.
Katrina is not the only disaster this company has helped out on. SAIC also worked on the Swiss Air crash in Nova Scotia in 1998.
We were very much in the right place at the right time.
And other extraordinary sessions were for the 2008 financial crisis, and the last one convened was for the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this Council of 200 met on May 4th, 2020 to respond to the new global crisis. The Council of 200 were the legislative authorities in 4 Swiss cities, as well as in the independent Republic of Geneva prior to the French Revolution. Although the council in Geneva dates back to 1526, the councils were medieval in origin, and they sometimes contained as many as 300 members. Now, this sounded very familiar to me. The Committee of 300, written by Dr. John Coleman, was a book published in the early 90s warning us that the Club of Rome was part of a secret group of 300 whose goal is to create a one-world government. Now, while rereading this book during the pandemic, I noticed of all the big pharmaceutical companies to be mentioned, it was Roche. Not Johnson & Johnson, not Pfizer, one of the other popular names, no, Roche. Page 106. The trend in making huge profits out of drugs was carried over into the 1960s by such legal drug death merchants as Sandoz, the makers of LSD, and Hoffmann La Roche, manufacturers of Valium. The cost of the raw material and manufacturing of Valium to Hoffmann La Roche is only $3 per kilo. It is sold to their distributors for $20,000 per kilo. By the time it reaches the consumer, the price of Valium has risen to $50,000 per kilo. Hoffmann La Roche does the same thing with vitamin C, which costs them less than 1 cent a kilo to produce. It is sold for a profit of 10,000%. When a friend of mine blew the whistle on this criminal company, which had entered into a monopoly agreement with other producers in contravention of the European Economic Community laws, he was arrested on the Swiss-Italian border and hustled into prison. His wife was threatened by the Swiss police until she committed suicide. He lost his wife, his job, and his pension because he dared to disclose Hoffmann La Roche's secrets. The Swiss take their industrial espionage law very seriously. Remember this next time you see those lovely advertisements of Swiss ski slopes or beautiful watches, pristine mountains, and cuckoo clocks. That is not what Switzerland is about. It is about dirty multi-billion-dollar money laundering, which is carried out by major Swiss banking houses. It is about the Committee of 300 legal drug manufacturers. Switzerland is the committee's ultimate safe haven for money and protection of their bodies in times of global calamity. Now, I was actually able to figure out the name of this friend that Dr. Coleman was referring to. It was whistleblower Stanley Adams, who published a book entitled Roche versus Adams, which wasn't super easy to get my hands on. This book demonstrates how the Swiss government considers whistleblowing against big pharma giants like Roche an act of industrial espionage. And look who is currently part of the National Council of Switzerland, another member of the Hoffmann-La Roche family. Roche and the Swiss government are one and the same. Stanley Adams was locked up at the Italian-Swiss border, and his wife committed suicide while he was imprisoned. A film was made based on his book. Now, the purpose of Stanley's whistleblowing was to expose illegal competition practices within Roche. Now, these practices have enormous implications on the entire planet. Roche is the largest manufacturer and distributor of vitamins in the world.
Vitamins. They come in a bunch of different forms: soft gels, tablets, liquids. It's a giant industry on the rise that makes billions of dollars annually,
which directly affects the demand and prices of the global supply chain.
Global supply chain crisis is happening right now. It's an economic fallout from the pandemic. Supply chain crisis. Issues severely impact the distribution of goods on an international scale, and as we've seen, have a very visible effect here in the United States. Sharply higher prices for food and energy, but also cars, clothing.
Just to reiterate, Roche is a huge international corporation with an overwhelming amount of power and protection from the government, similar to that of an American biotech company called Leidos, who is also conducting clinical trials for COVID-19 therapeutics and in fact teamed up with Roche to work on technology advancements in sequencing cancer genes. Now, this is Nancy Roche, and this is her LinkedIn page. And I can't say for sure if Nancy is related to the Hoffmann-La Roche family, but she certainly has some interesting credentials to say the least. And Roche even worked on mRNA vaccines as early as 2016. And don't forget, Roche saw strong first quarter sales in COVID-19 tests. Roche receives decades of dividends for the Swiss aristocrats. The leader in biotechnology, cancer treatment, and diagnostics has had 28 consecutive years of dividend growth. And then I heard about the midazolam scandal happening in the UK involving the killing of elderly people in the Liverpool Pathway nursing homes.
The Liverpool Care Pathway, or LCP.
You produced a new documentary that's essentially about euthanasia during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's called The Good Death, Euthanasia in the UK.
Some patients were being put on the LCP without anyone giving permission. Some families only found out about it after a loved one had passed away.
They would put them on this drip, which would put them into basically a medically induced coma. And then through different protocols and legal loopholes and things like that, they would cut off their feeding and water, put them into a coma and let them starve and dehydrate to death.
There were reports of treatments being removed too quickly. Some families said their loved ones had been left without food or water.
I was bathing her head, wetting her lips, and she opened her eyes and she looked at me and said, "I'm hungry." So at this point, I was really, emotional.
There was a conversation between Health Minister Matt Hancock and Conservative MP Dr. Luke Evans.
A good death needs three things. It needs equipment, it needs medication, and it needs the staff to administer it. So in terms of equipment, a few quick questions. Do you have enough syringe drivers in the NHS to deliver medications to keep people comfortable when they're passing away? Yes, we do.
And they're very openly discussing how best to give patients a, quote, good death.
With that's the syringe drivers deliver medication, particularly things like midazolam and morphine. Do you have any precautions put in place to make sure we have enough of those medications to be delivered? Yes.
and they're talking about what equipment, medications, and what staff they need to administer that good death.
Midazolam and morphine.
And so in March 2020, before the lockdowns really happened, the UK ordered vast record amounts of a drug called midazolam.
The orders for this in the community increased by 2,000% during the pseudo-pandemic.
Got documents showing the dosage of midazolam that was recommended for COVID patients. I've got a document showing how to manage breathlessness in patients by using midazolam.
It causes the symptoms that you would say were caused by COVID. It depresses the respiratory system.
Why would you give a medication that suppresses the respiratory system for a respiratory disease? Why would you give it to a person with a respiratory disease? It makes no sense.
It's a benzodiazepine, which is in the same family as Valium, Xanax.
It's an end-of-life drug as well.
It's also used in lethal injections, or was used at least in lethal injections in the United States.
This one is called midazolam, and in 3 executions, there might have been some problems with it, gasping or snorting or making choking sounds, and at least in 1 execution that the inmate was actually speaking.
I thought I might be able to guess whose drugs were being used in the midazolam scandal.
I'd be fascinated if it was Roche.
Who is the creator of midazolam?
That was originally created by Roche Pharmaceuticals, who obviously you're very familiar with.
Roche.
And it is Roche.
Now, my friend Cliché Garvera started covering this scandal, and the researcher that was involved was found dead.
Exposing the mistreatment of elderly in care homes.
It was basically a death sentence. If you went to the hospital, they'd put you on remdesivir and put you on a ventilator, and then you had like a 90% chance of dying. And that was the American version of the UK protocol. And remdesivir is also a Roche pharmaceutical product.
What a scandalous thing that our government is fully cooperating with this organization built up by the Royal Institute for International Affairs to destroy the middle class of the United States and to add to the policies of global genocide. And that brings me to the next question. What is the Global 2000? Once again, when I heard about this policy, it was 3 days after it had been accepted by the United States government as its official policy. And the Global 2000 was a blueprint for mass genocide produced by the Club of Rome. Basically, what the Global 2000 calls for is the destruction of half of the world's population by the year 2050, hence the title 2000. They built a case based on Bertrand Russell and H.G. Wells' findings that the world was going to be overpopulated, would be a terrible place to live in. That was picked up by a fellow called Robert Strange McNamara, and a stranger individual you're not likely to meet in this world. And this man had a conference of all the leading bankers about 12 years ago, and he said the biggest menace facing the world today is the American middle class and overpopulation. He linked the two together. And he said, by the year 2050, this is the state of the world. All of these unfed, unwashed people, no jobs. He said, do we want to live in a world like that? So the Global 2000 was a genocidal plan to take care of the people of the United States who don't have any jobs and who, like Alexander King said, are never going to get their jobs back.
Dr. Coleman wrote a book called The Club of Rome, and it's full of information about this specific group whom he believes has a lot of power. It's clear that the reports and information they presented in the 70s is what started the revolutionary environmental movement that so many socialist progressives parrot on a daily basis on social media and the like. Most people I know personally are completely brainwashed into believing global warming is real and that the governments need to institute redistributionist policies in order to fix the problem. Coleman identifies hard left and socialist ideas as being very destructive throughout his work.
By our enemies, the socialists, the Marxists, the liberals, the so-called progressives. Socialism is a failure.
Even though the propagandists are very clever in draping their miserable ideas in the finest hues, it doesn't change the fact that socialism is slavery. When referring to the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions on page 57, he says, quote, Purpose: to spread ideas that will bring on social reforms of the liberal kind, with democracy as an ideology. One of its activities is to draw a new constitution for the U.S. which will be strongly monarchical and socialistic as found in Denmark. The center is an Olympian stronghold, located in Santa Barbara. It is housed in what is affectionately called the Parthenon. Former Representative John Rarick called it an outfit loaded with communists. By 1873, work on a new United States Constitution was in its 35th draft, which proposes an amendment guaranteeing environmental rights, the thrust of which is to reduce the industrial base of the United States to a mere whisper of what it was in 1969. In other words, this institution is carrying out Club of Rome's zero-growth policy, industrial policies laid down by the Committee of 300, unquote. The network of groups is basically endless. It would take years just to name all of them and their connections with each other. As a matter of fact, Coleman takes a few pages to list them. Organizations such as League of Industrial Democracy, Freedom House, Committee for a Democratic Majority, Foreign Policy Research Institute, Social Democrats USA, Institute for Social Relations, the Citizens League, War Resisters League, the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee of the Institute for Democratic Socialism, Anti-Defamation League Fact-Finding Division, International Association of Machinists, Amalgamated Clothing Workers, A. Philip Randolph Institute, Cambridge Policy Studies Institute, Economic Committee of the North Atlantic Institute, Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions, Harvard Psychological Clinic, Institute for Social Research Institute for Social Research, Science Policy Research Institute, Systems Development Corporation, the Mont Pelerin Society, Hoover Institution, Heritage Foundation, Human Resource Research Office, Research Analysis Corporation, and many, many others. So we can see that most of these institutions are of a left-wing bent, and Coleman's very clear about that it's not conservative values that are the enemy, it's liberal values that are the enemy.
And they've started this beverage plan, which is the basis of our socialist social security plan. Note, I said socialist social security plan. That's how we got it. It was co-opted directly from the beverage plan, very eagerly embraced by Roosevelt. Socialism is a failure.
So we've seen how these groups are incredibly influential in creating public opinion and even controlling the cabinets of entire presidencies. Coleman makes it clear on page 154 that voting is a farce. Quote, "Our election has become a farce thanks to the work done by Tavistock in controlling the thoughts and ideas of the people of this nation by means of inner directional conditioning and long-distance penetration, of which the mind control science of polling is an integral part. Tavistock serves the black nobility in all its elements, working to rob us of the victory of the American Revolution of 1776. If the reader is unfamiliar with the black nobility, of course, the term does not refer to black people. It refers to a group of extremely wealthy people, dynasties, whose history dates back far more than 500 years and who make up the backbone of the Committee of 300, unquote."
The Venetian black nobility. Now, why are they called the black nobility? They're called that because of the vileness and the evilness of their deeds. These families date back to the 11th centuries, the Locatis, the Recanatis. They were called, and the Guelphs, by the way, I'll come to them, they're particularly interesting. They were called that because of the evilness of their deeds. They made Lucrezia Borgia look like a Sunday school teacher. They had so much money, which is the outcome of the drug trade, the years of investing, the years of gaining control of every mining, mineral, gold, oil, natural resource of the world, that they can afford to finance these things. So the black nobility are the ancient aristocrats of Venice and Genoa, and they called that because of the nature of their deeds. The black Guelphs were one of the worst of them. Now, interesting enough, the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, is a Guelph. She's not a Windsor. This was a title that was evolved in 1935 by her father to put researchers off the track. I like to include myself in that category, although I wasn't doing it then. I was much too young to be doing it, but he didn't like that certain people were getting hot on the track of who this royal family actually was, and so this was put out that they are the House of Windsor. They are not. They're the House of Guelph, and it's important for us to know that, because every time there's a financial crisis, it follows a meeting of the Black Guelphs upon the Royal Britannia yacht of the Queen of England, which anchors off the coast of Venice, and all the world bankers meet over there and say, now this is what we're going to do to country X, this is how we're going to control this worldwide situation, and then they go off and give their orders to everybody. So that is the way it is done.
I believe that elections, especially modern, are trauma-based mind control. It was easy to see with the 2016 election cycle between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. The population is hit with fear-mongering and low-vibrational drama. By the time the election is over, the people are tired and beaten down, and the morale as a whole suffers. This trauma gets us used to being abused, and as the government becomes more powerful and totalitarian, they will attempt to abuse the people as much as they would like in order to secure their one world government plans. Coleman states on page 42, quote, "The Levin Club of Rome plan is designed to demoralize us all so that in the end we feel we should follow whatever it is that is planned for us. We will follow Club of Rome's orders like sheep," unquote. It is my belief, based on my research, that what Dr. Coleman is telling us is largely, if not completely, true. I always say that if people would just take the time to read the works of these globalist thinkers, they wouldn't have to wonder whether it's true or not that the elite really think this way. If it's not enough for you to look around at the world and come to the conclusion it's run by very evil people for very evil ends, then I suggest reading the Bertrand Russells, the H.G. Wells, the Miles Copelands, the Henry Kissingers, and the Zbigniew Zabrinskis, because they tell you in no uncertain terms what your crazy tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist friend has been telling you all along is indeed very true.
How many times haven't I heard it said of me, that fellow's paranoid? Yes, I'm glad to admit it.
Truth is not a given.
Vaccines, GMOs,
Jeffrey Epstein.
There are those who want the truth suppressed, sequestered, and exploited. Then there are those who want the truth revealed, disseminated, and uncensored. You are one of those people. You deserve the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me today. For this presentation, we will be discussing Dr. Anthony Fauci from the President's Coronavirus Task Force, and some very interesting background regarding the very secretive Order of the Jesuits. And this might explain a little bit about his actions over the last few weeks. At a White House press briefing to address the coronavirus, when Donald Trump answered a reporter's question by saying, "You know what I'd like to do? I'd like him to go back to the State Department," or as they call it, the Deep State Department. Dr. Fauci immediately, unnecessarily, does a face palm, as if he can't control himself, ladies and gentlemen. This couldn't be further from the truth, as I suspect that this man has total control of his emotions, probably much more than any of us. And I'll explain why in a bit. When the president spoke in a very promising way on the hydrochloric cure possibility, America's favorite doctor then contradicted the president when the doctor was asked if this is a cure by saying the answer is no, because the evidence you're talking about is anecdotal. Now, anecdotal is defined as based on casual observations or indications rather than rigorous or scientific analysis. pertaining to or consisting of antidotes. A simple "we will see" or "time will tell" would have sufficed. This comment seems a bit overkill by the doctor. This man, Dr. Fauci, is highly, highly intelligent. He must understand how that statement would be ran with the press, does he not? Here's some credentials. Anthony Stephen Fauci, born December 24th, 1940, is an American immunologist who serves as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and as a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force addressing the 2019-20 coronavirus pandemic. As a physician with the National Institutes of Health of the United States, he has served public health in various capacities for over 50 years. He has made contributions to HIV, AIDS research, and other immunodeficiencies, both as a scientist and as the head of the NIAID at the NIH. The rag New York Times called Fauci the nation's leading expert on infectious diseases. Fauci was born in Brooklyn, New York, to Stephen A. Fauci and Eugenia A. Fauci, owners of a pharmacy, where his father worked as the pharmacist. His mother and sister worked the register, and Fauci delivered prescriptions. Fauci's paternal grandparents, Antonio Fauci and Calogero Guardino, were from Sciacca, Italy. His maternal grandmother, Raffaella Trematera, from Naples, Italy, was a seamstress. And his maternal grandfather, Giovanni Abis, was born in Switzerland and was an artist, noted for his landscape and portrait painting and magazine illustrations, as well as graphic design for commercial labels, including olive oil cans. His great-grandparents emigrated to the USA in the late 19th century, and Fauci grew up, obviously, Roman Catholic. Fauci attended Regis High School in New York City, where he graduated in 1958. He then enrolled at the College of the Holy Cross, where he received a bachelor's in classics in 1962. Fauci then went on to attend Cornell University Medical College, where he graduated first in his class with an MD in 1966. He then completed an internship and residency at the New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center. But he can't control his emotions and makes faces and gestures in the middle of a national press conference, like an adolescent. Right? Regis High School is a private Jesuit university preparatory school for Roman Catholic young men located on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Annual class enrollment is limited to approximately 135 male students from the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut tri-state area. So very exclusive. Not just anyone can enroll. The school is ranked as both the best Catholic high school in the United States and the best all-boys school in New York. Regis is also consistently ranked in the top 5 high schools in the nation in regard to SAT and ACT scores. St. Regis High School was founded in 1914 through the financial bequest of a single formerly anonymous benefactress, Julia M. Grant, the widow of Mayor Hugh J. Grant. She stipulated that her gift be used to build a Jesuit high school providing a free education for Catholic boys, with special consideration given to those who could not otherwise afford a Catholic education. The school continues that policy and does not charge tuition today. The Grant's former home is the residence of the Vatican Observer to the United Nations. This is where the Pope stays when he visits New York City. Now, if anyone out there is familiar with the Order of the Jesuits, you are making some serious connections here. We'll touch upon some of the basics of the Jesuits' methods of operation and some of their rituals. However, we cannot go too far, as we will be covering the Jesuits much more extensively in another presentation devoted entirely to this sun-worshipping cult. The Jesuits are possibly the most secretive, well-organized, disciplined, intellectual mystery school order of them all. In another presentation, I can take you from the 1500s and its founding by Spaniard Ignatius Loyola to the takeover of the Vatican, to the alliance with the Red Shield or the Rothschilds, to the war for independence, to the Civil War, all the way to modern times. They've played a role in all of this, and it's done usually by controlling both sides of a conflict or issue. They are and always will be masters of infiltration and subversion. Their main goal, like that with most of the mystery schools, is to destabilize every government or institution, and then to swoop in with a solution, their solution, usually consisting of them fixing the problem, but while leaving them in a new position of power over those whom have just experienced this problem or issue. Hegelian dialectic: problem, reaction, solution. And when, as this presentation is being created, we are getting ready to approve a $2 trillion loan from the Criminal Federal Reserve in order to fix the SARS-CoV-2 problem. It makes one wonder, doesn't it? This is how they operate, folks. And don't forget this fact, please. Admission to St. Regis is no joke. A prospective student is any 8th grader, baptized Roman Catholic male who has demonstrated superior academic ability, and first completes an application that includes the composition of multiple short essays, and then sits for Regis's own admission test. Of the approximately 1,000 students who sit for this test each year, about 230 are selected for 2 interviews with 1 faculty member and 1 alumni, and around 135 students are admitted. And that's today. I suspect it was much less back when the good doctor attended. There are also various publications that students can work on, such as the newspaper called The Owl, or their yearbook called The Region, as well as several literary publications such as their sports magazine called The Falcon, a journal of opinion called The Crow, and a movie review magazine called Flicks Picks, and a literary magazine called The Raven. Now, the owl, dear listeners, is a very important symbol to them. An owl can see in the dark. Occultists like to use the owl as one of their symbols because they can see things that the average person from the public cannot, or the profane, as they call us. Occult members are enlightened to the dark inner workings of the secret society. Think Bilderberg. They worship that owl and do mock sacrifices to it. The falcon, well, to them it symbolizes the story of the phoenix. In ancient Greek folklore, a phoenix is a long-lived bird that cyclically regenerates or is otherwise born again. And there's that rebirth again, if you've been following this channel. It further states that it's associated with the sun. A phoenix obtains new life by arising from the ashes of its predecessor. Some legends say it dies in a show of flames and combustion. Others that it simply dies and decomposes before being born again. This is mostly just a retelling of the dramas of Isis and Osiris. Please watch the videos on the mystery schools from this channel to see what it is that we are speaking about here. It's very important. Herodotus, Lucan, Pliny the Elder, Pope Clement, and Isidore of Seville are among those who have contributed to the retelling and transmission of the phoenix motif. The phoenix symbolized renewal in general, as well as entities and concepts such as the sun, time, the Roman Empire, Christ, Mary, and virginity. This bird is likely a falcon, and you will see that in another presentation on this channel. The editorial paper and an image on the school logo takes the name of the crow. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this is yet another symbol for their devotion to the occult, and we will explain this in another presentation also. The sister school for St. Regis, the Covenant of the Sacred Heart, in Manhattan, would do joint plays and productions. One of these productions consisted of alumnus Lady Gaga, who attended the all-girls school, Jesuit Sacred Heart. She performed a musical at St. Regis. They're all in the family, dear listeners. Dr. Fauci then attended the College of the Holy Cross, where he received a bachelor's in classics in 1962. Now, what is a classics degree? Classics, or classical studies, is the study of classical antiquity. It encompasses the study of the Greco-Roman world, particularly of its languages and literature, like ancient Greek and classical Latin, but also of Greco-Roman philosophy, history, and archaeology. Traditionally in the West, the study of the Greek and Roman classics is considered one of the cornerstones of the humanities and a fundamental element of a rounded education. The study of classics has therefore traditionally been a cornerstone of a typical elite education. Ladies and gentlemen, this definition of a classics degree could also simply be referred to as the study of the mystery schools, as this covers many of the most well-known initiates like Homer, Plato, Pythagoras, etc. I'd also like to point out that this is a very peculiar degree to go into if one is going into medicine, of which the good doctor was indeed doing, unless of course one was studying the history of his forefathers to better understand the exo and esoteric meanings of the great abstract truths of this world, preparing him for his future service to the order. Holy Cross is a private Jesuit liberal arts college in Worcester, Massachusetts, founded in 1843. Holy Cross is the oldest Catholic college in New England and one of the oldest in the United States. Opened as a school for boys under the auspices of the Society of Jesus, it was the first Jesuit college in New England. Holy Cross has traditionally drawn many of its students from a pool of historical Catholic high schools and private boarding schools, though a majority of current undergraduates come from public schools. I'd like to point out the seal of the Holy Cross seen here and this next picture, and you'll recall this if you've watched some of the Mystery Babylon series from this channel. A symbol of the Order of the Rose and Cross, one of the Jesuits' immediate predecessors, many say, which is really just the symbol of the zodiac cross. And of course, what would a mystery school cult be if they didn't have their zodiac and their sun or their Satan? The school color is purple. According to Wikipedia, there are two theories of how Holy Cross chose purple as its official color. One suggests it was derived from royal purple used by Constantine the Great as displayed on his military standard and on those of later Christian emperors of Rome. And again, if you've been watching this channel, you'll know that Constantine was the one who morphed the sun-worshipping Roman Empire into the Catholic Church, and that sun worship is still practiced in many Catholic churches today, ladies and gentlemen, whether the priest and the parishioners even know it or not. And most don't. Written in the book is the college's motto, In hoc signo vinces, which translates as, by this sign thou shalt conquer. The phrase is credited to our favorite Roman Emperor Constantine, and these signs are still seen all over today. A few graduates from here that some of you may know are Chris Matthews, who recently retired from MSNBC, like all those CEOs who keep retiring every other day. Several alumni have held top positions in the world of business and finance. Bob Wright, Chairman and CEO NBC Universal. He was also Vice Chairman of General Electric. James David Power III, that's J.D. Power and Associates founder. William J. McDonough, President of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and Vice Chairman of Merrill Lynch. Ever heard of Dick Cusack? Well, maybe you've heard of his children. Actors John Cusack, Joan Cusack, or Ann Cusack. Wow, what are the odds? One man having 3 kids that all break into Hollywood and become successful actors. Yes, they're hidden everywhere, folks. You just have to open your eyes and look. Dr. Fauci took a job at the National Institute of Health directly after school, a place he still works today. He met his wife there, Christine Grady. She's an American nurse and bioethicist who as of 2020 serves as the head of the Department of Bioethics at the National Institutes of Health Clinical Center. Bioethics is the study of the ethical issues emerging from advances in biology and medicine. It is also moral discernment as it relates to medical policy and practice. Bioethics are concerned with the ethical questions that arise in the relationships among life sciences, biotechnology, medicine, and medical ethics, politics, law, theology, and philosophy. She has her BS and her PhD from Georgetown U, another Jesuit college. And she's a social justice warrior, which probably isn't good when you're in charge of ethics. In a March 24th article from Heavy.com, she is quoted as saying, quote, "She was inspired to pursue nursing as a career by her parents, who instilled it in her a sense of civic responsibility." Grady told the NIH in 1997 that, "When we were children, I can remember at young ages going on civil rights marches and things like that, because my parents took us there. We did not know what they were really about, because at the time, although I was older than some of my brothers and sisters, I was not that old. So some of the things did not register directly then, but I think they had an impact later on. So I have always been interested." Again, there was my parents' influence in social issues. Figures, because here is Doctor with Hillary Clinton, and I think that's his wife in the front left with the white coat at some function. Dr. Fauci has won a few Cabal Awards, like the 2013 Robert Koch Gold Medal, the Arthur S. Fleming Award in 1979, and George W. Bush awarded him the National Medal of Science and a Presidential Medal of Freedom Award in 2008. According to the Holy Cross magazine, in their summer of 2002 edition, they interviewed America's favorite doctor, and they had this to say about his attending St. Regis High, quote, "The distance he had to travel to get there is difficult to explain, for reasons of time or geography, and also for reasons of culture. The trip took 75 to 80 minutes each way. A bus and 3 subways during rush hour in both directions. By rough calculation, all the time he spent commuting during his 4 years at Regis, it cost him more than 70 days. That's a long ways to travel to school, folks." Fauci often credits part of his professional success to the inculcation of Jesuit intellectual rigor that was a core part of his education. an emphasis on organization and logic, on succinctness and clarity of expression. And we spoke about this a little earlier. The Jesuits are very intellectual and meticulous in their duties. If Dr. Fauci is an agent of the Jesuits sent into the U.S. medical apparatus to do the greater work, then he would have been young when they would have began watching him. Since many Jesuits control many high schools and universities throughout the country and world, then they could, according to a manuscript found in the library of the Rue Rijalou at Paris, entitled History of the Jesuits in 1709, says that they mold the youthful mind according to their secret aims. If then, after a number of years, they detected in the pupil a blind and fanatic faith, they proceeded to initiate him. There are many levels of degrees for the Jesuits, just like all of the sun-worshipping cults. The Jesuits are closely related to the Rosicrucians, the Gnostics, and the Skull and Bones. We know three famous Skull and Bonesmen, don't we? George Bush Jr., George Herbert Walker Bush, and John Kerry. These three mystery school orders have all been rumored to use actual body parts like bones or skulls or other parts of special people or saints as relics and used during their rituals. If the good doctor is an agent of the order, he would be a perfect fit. Highly intelligent, obviously highly motivated and highly disciplined. And look at him, highly inconspicuous, and then having made entry into an important American institution, just like the unelected deep state does so well. Right out of college, I'd like to point out. And he is able to then immediately begin to promote up to the director position he holds today. He finished number 1 in his medical school at Cornell U, where he got his doctorate. He was so motivated and so disciplined that he drove the subway one way for an hour and a half and then an hour and a half back home, 5 days a week. If he is doing the greater work of the order and is a high-ranking member, then, according to a book by researcher Carlos Didier, the doctor would have been called to the chapel of the Covenant of the Order, where there are only 3 others present. The principal or superior standing in front of the altar, and on either side would stand a monk, one of whom holds a banner of yellow and white, which are the papal colors. And the superior then says to the candidate, "My son, heretofore you have been taught to act the dissembler," which is defined as to disguise or conceal behind a false appearance. Among Roman Catholics, to be a Roman Catholic, and to be a spy even among your own brethren. To believe no man, to trust no man, and obtaining their confidence, that you might be enabled to gather together all information for the benefit of your order as a faithful soldier of the Pope. You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between communities, provinces, states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in countries that were independent and prosperous. Cultivating the arts and the sciences, and enjoying the blessings of peace. To take sides with the combatants, and to act secretly with your brother Jesuit, who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that with which you might be connected. Only that the order might be the gainer in the end, in the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the ends justify the means. And you've heard that saying if you've been following this channel. You have been taught your duty as a spy to gather all statistics, facts, and information in your power from every source, to ingratiate yourself into the confidence of the family circle of every class and character, as well as that of the merchant, the banker, the lawyer, among the schools and universities, in parliaments and legislatures, and the judiciaries and councils of state. And the good doctor would have recited the following. Listen close. That I may go to any part of the world, whither so far I may be sent, to the frozen regions of the north, the burning sands of the deserts of Africa, or the jungles of India, to the centers of civilizations of Europe, or to the wild haunts of the barbarous savages of America, without murmuring or repining, and will be submissive in all things whatsoever communicated to me. I further promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, as I am directed to do, to exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed so to do by any agent of the Pope or Superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. If you enjoyed this presentation, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.
We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein. We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein. We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein.
According to legend, young Bill Gates built his computer empire out of his garage. Reality tells another story, that Bill Gates was born into wealth and privilege. Both his grandfather and great-grandfather were banking moguls. His father, William Gates Sr., was a prominent Seattle-based lawyer and political lobbyist. Through his father, Bill Gates learned the ins and outs of law and politics and how to manipulate those governing forces.
I'm Bill Gates, chairman of Microsoft.
Bill Gates dropped out of college to start Microsoft. He is credited with inventing the operating system that became Windows. However, he played no part in the invention of Windows. The fact is, he bought an existing operating system from Seattle Computer Products, had it modified, then licensed it to IBM. That didn't stop him from taking all the credit.
I don't see Bill Gates as this great creative person. I see him as an opportunist.
While Microsoft's co-founder Paul Allen was struggling with cancer, Bill Gates seized the opportunity by attempting to cheat him out of his share of the company's fortune.
They were basically talking about how they were planning to dilute my share down to almost nothing. And it was really a shocking and disheartening moment for me.
And you were sick?
Well, I think I was still probably in the middle of radiation therapy.
Gates' business strategies came under fire in 1998 when the United States Department of Justice sued Microsoft for antitrust violations.
This is tape 3 of the videotape deposition of Bill Gates on September.
During the 18-month trial, Gates gave hours of videotape testimony.
What were the non-Microsoft browsers that you were concerned about in January of 1996?
That month.
Yes, sir.
And what about it?
What non-Microsoft browsers were you concerned about in January of 1996?
I don't know, what do you mean concerned?
What is it about the word concerned that you don't understand?
I'm not sure what you mean by it.
The Justice Department has charged Microsoft with engaging in anti-competitive and exclusionary practices designed to maintain its monopoly in personal computer operating systems.
In a move to overshadow the negative press, Gates invested $100 million to set up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Overnight, Bill Gates transformed his public image from ruthless tech monopolizer to the world's most generous philanthropist.
I'm pleased to announce that we're pledging an additional $1 billion to
We had the chance to witness Bill Gates 2.0, the man you don't know.
The rebranding campaign paid off. His net worth swiftly doubled, earning Bill Gates the title of richest man in the world.
You've invested $10 billion in vaccinations over the last 2 decades, and you figured out the return on investment for that, and it kind of stunned me. Can you walk us through the math?
In a Wall Street essay, Bill Gates declared vaccines the best investment I've ever made.
There's been over a 20-to-1 return. So if you just look at the economic benefits, that's a pretty strong number compared to anything else.
The Gates Foundation expanded rapidly into a massive, vertically integrated, multinational corporation, controlling every step in a supply chain that reaches from its Seattle-based boardrooms to the villages of Africa and Asia.
Is the world's largest private philanthropy causing harm? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has made millions of dollars each year from companies blamed for many of the same social and health problems the foundation seeks to address. The Gates Foundation has investments in 69 of the worst polluting companies in the U.S. and Canada. Other companies in the foundation's portfolio have been accused of transgressions, including forcing thousands of people to lose their homes, supporting child labor, defrauding and neglecting patients in need of medical care. The Gates Foundation has not provided details.
William H. Gates III and Melinda French Gates.
As a top donor to both the WHO and the CDC, no one man has more power than Bill Gates to influence and control the health and medical freedom of all people.
Normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population.
This will be the new normal until a vaccine is developed.
Until we find a vaccine, going back to normal means putting lives at risk.
We need to produce it and to deploy it in every single corner of the world.
Full vaccination of our children and pregnant women.
Development of new vaccines, therapeutics and diagnostics.
For effective vaccines and therapeutics are developed.
We've already bought the syringes. We already know where it's going to happen. We're thinking about what that's going to be. It's all part of this plan.
Our military is now being mobilized, so at the end of the year, we're going to be able to give it to a lot of people very, very rapidly.
In 1986, President Ronald Reagan signed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, granting total immunity to vaccine manufacturers. After a decade of lawsuits related to vaccine injuries and deaths, vaccine makers were going bankrupt. In a move to coerce policymakers, vaccine companies threatened to stop making vaccines until they could be legally shielded from liability. To this day, when someone is injured or killed as the result of an adverse reaction, it is the U.S. taxpayers that pay for the damages.
Welcome back. Were several Indian tribal girls used as guinea pigs? The report alleges that 2 American pharma giants' untested vaccine was administered to thousands of tribal girls without proper study and paperwork.
India was among the hardest hit after Bollywood celebrities were incentivized by the Gates Foundation to urge the public to submit to mass vaccinations. In 2009, tribal children were administered the HPV vaccine. Over 24,000 girls were told they were being given wellness shots, in many cases without the informed consent of a parent or a guardian.
The people that were administering these vaccines lied to the guardians of these girls and told the girls, oh, this is going to cure cancer, you're never going to have cancer. And these girls became severely injured. Some of them developed seizures, some of them developed cancer, and 7 girls died. And there was no insurance, there was no assistance for them, and the Gates Foundation denied that it had been clinical trials. And it was so bad that the parliament in India created a task force, they studied it, and they kicked out the Gates Foundation.
But India is a barbaric country. Things happen here in a very barbaric way. But I was surprised to find an American organization operating in broad daylight, doing things in a very, very, let's say, Indian fashion. And so the route I took was that I want the whole procedure to be investigated. The Indian Parliament formed a committee, and it was to me a rather surprising move because you generally don't often have such a high-level inquiry into matters affecting poor people. And that was such an extraordinary report. I don't think Indian Parliament has ever come out with such a scathing report. And the government officials came up and said, we shouldn't have authorized this. We're sorry. We're not going to allow them again. And now they're back doing their same old tricks again.
The good news is that human clinical trials can start as early as July 2020 for India's first COVID-19 indigenous vaccine that's been developed by Bharat Biotech.
So you can imagine how the manipulation of the media, by the media, the manipulation of public opinion by leaders from all political parties unanimously saying, we want a vaccine. And the worst thing is they are taken as philanthropists. Whereas what this actually is the acquisition of political and financial power. And I think the second most populous country with 1.3 billion people is going to be a good base for pharmaceutical companies to make a killing and also kill a lot of people in the process. Yes, I just find it a pity that we haven't been able to get any benefit for the girls who suffered, you know. It's so terrifying as to what they're actually doing with the world.
We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein.
A 2018 scientific study released in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health concluded that over 490,000 children in India developed paralysis as a result of the Gates-supported oral polio vaccine that was administered between the years of 2000 and 2017. Using all the usual sleight of hand, U.S.-based media and fact-checkers rushed to bury the story. But thanks to the meticulous work of a team of Indian researchers and doctors, the inconvenient truth lives on the NIH.gov website.
It's my honor to introduce Bill and Melinda Gates.
Without any medical training, Bill and Melinda Gates founded the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, through which they fulfill their agenda to vaccinate the world. The foundation has been sued by the governments of some of the poorest and most vulnerable nations for causing serious harm through experimental vaccine programs.
If you just look at healthcare workers around the world, they deserve to get the vaccine first. Here in the United States, really, it's going to be Black people who really should get it first, and many indigenous people.
Vaccines were always taught to us that it was safe, it was healthy, this is things that we had to do. But given the position that I am in now as a state legislator, and looking at these studies and reviewing a lot of these studies, is very scary. And I want the African American community to open up their eyes.
Of all the places that Mr. Gates could have gone in the world, why did he settle on Africa? It's not because he cares about people that look like me. He cares about an agenda.
African bodies have been used as lab rats for many years for Big Pharma.
They are using us for trials, they are using us for testing, but as an African, I say no more.
Africans. They're tired of becoming the guinea pigs of the world. Their antennas are raised and they're telling each other all over social media. They're on high alert right now.
There is a policy of the American government. It's called the Kissinger Report, which was produced in the mid-70s. And it explicitly states that the purpose of the foreign policy in Africa was to reduce the population, because they have great mineral resources there. At the time, Kissinger and those involved with the Carter administration wanted to shrink the population, make sure that the Africans do not develop and do not use the resources for themselves, because we in the States, we need them. There is a concerted effort of foreign powers to control the population of Africa.
Some children did survive the botched vaccinations last month and will recover, but 15, all under the age of 5, died from fever, vomiting, and diarrhea.
Human errors contributed to the unfortunate deaths of the children.
How can you believe Big Pharma but not believe these parents when they tell you that their children have been injured by Big Pharma? I don't care how big this corporate machine looks. As a parent, I can tell you, these people will never stop fighting for their kids.
It would take hours to list all of the questionable initiatives that Bill Gates is involved in. Here's a few of the highlights. Gates is one of the key funders in the stratospheric-controlled perturbation experiment designed to block out the sun in an effort to control global warming by releasing massive amounts of calcium carbonate and other materials into the upper atmosphere. Critics, including environmental scientists, have called the project a global genocide experiment. Gates has invested over $1 billion in Earth Now's global surveillance project. The project will launch hundreds of satellites into space, which will allow for the 24/7 monitoring of all people everywhere. In partnership with MIT, Bill Gates has developed a new technology that allows vaccines to be injected under your skin along with your medical records. The quantum dot tattoo will implant an invisible certificate that can be scanned by authorities using a cell phone app and infrared light.
Eventually, what we'll have is certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person. So eventually there will be this digital immunity proof.
The EPA recently approved an experimental use permit to Oxitec, a biotech company funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In an effort to fight malaria, Oxitec will soon release millions of genetically modified mosquitoes in various U.S. states. According to the NIH website, programs are being developed to allow human immunization via mosquito bite. It was Science magazine that coined the phrase, flying syringes.
Would you raise your hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending should be the
A shocking new report from the New York Times sheds light on the connection between Microsoft founder Bill Gates and the late Jeffrey Epstein. You report these two men met at least 6 times.
Well, I believe there were more. This included visits to the mansion, seeing each other in Seattle, flying on Epstein's plane.
When flight logs revealed that Gates had been a passenger on the Lolita Express, he claimed that he didn't know that the private jet belonged to Epstein. He also denied that he and Mr. Epstein were involved in any business deals. However, an expose by the New York Times revealed that not only did Bill Gates initiate a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein well after he was convicted of sex crimes, but the two were also involved in the process of co-founding a multi-billion-dollar charitable fund.
Why would they ever set up a charitable trust benefiting Jeffrey Epstein?
That it was all about philanthropy, that Bill Gates just wanted to find new sources of money.
Why would one of the richest men in the world choose to partner with the world's most notorious pedophile? A deeper dive into Epstein's world revealed that the two men had more in common than meets the eye. Like Gates, Epstein was a billionaire philanthropist with a passion for science, health, education, and children. The Jeffrey Epstein Foundation donated millions of dollars to top universities, science institutes, medical schools, early education programs, youth initiatives, and international peace accords. Bill Gates is either the most misunderstood man alive or one of the most convincing con men to ever live. Is he a benevolent hero or a malevolent opportunist?
Bill Gates.
Personally, I would love to believe that one of the richest men in the world is giving away his fortune for the betterment of humanity. I want to believe that endearing smile. I want to believe that his heart is as soft and warm as his sweaters. At the very least, I want to believe that he's unaware of the damage he's done.